crying. Like, I don't even know if I can finish the sentence. And I have the sense that she doesn't want to be sad. That she doesn't want me to cry because she doesn't want to cry.
Do you mind just 1 second? Just need to get tissues. Today's episode is with Dan Ariely, behavioral scientist, best-selling author, and the mind behind Predictably Irrational. Initially, we agreed to talk about why we make irrational choices, but the conversation took a turn and we ended up talking about something even more important: end of life, and the kind of decisions you only start to make when you know exactly when are you going to die. Quick note, I got a bit emotional and my editors had fun with it. And to be honest, I'm recording this 1 week after we filmed and I'm still digesting parts of it. Now let's start what Dan is most excited about lately.
I'm a social scientist, and the way I look at life is I look at different areas: how we manage our money, how we manage our sleep, our health, our relationship, and so on. And in each area, I have kind of my own estimate of where we are now as humanity and where I think we could be. So think about this gap. Where are we in terms of managing our money? Where I think we could be if we did our best. Where we are with managing sleep, hate, taking care of the environment, all kinds of things like that. And my second question is this gap between where we are now and where I think we could be, is it driven by things that are within the control of social science? So can social science narrow this gap? Sometimes you can say it's nothing to do with social science. Like with global warming, we have to do all kinds of things that have to do with emissions. It's not a social science question. So my standard is to look around at areas that have a big gap, and then I look for areas where I think the gap could be reduced with social science. Okay, so a few years ago, I did the following study. I went to a group of palliative care physicians. Do you know this expression, palliative care?
No.
Palliative care physicians are physicians that don't try to heal people. They just try to take care of quality of life. So they usually come into the picture in the last few days or the last few weeks. When people say, I have nothing to do, go to palliative care. But the reality is that palliative care is what we do most of our lives. Most of our life we go out with friends, we go to the movies, we go for a run, we do things for fun. We take care of our quality of life, then people get sick, and then usually they stop thinking about quality of life. For example, imagine somebody gets diagnosed with cancer, and their physician says, I've scheduled for you chemotherapy on Wednesday at 4. How many people would say, doctor, Wednesday at 4, I'm meeting friends for beer, can we do it Thursday? The moment people are diagnosed, they become patients first and people later. And then the disease progresses, and then toward the end, they remember about quality of life, and they call the palliative care physician. Anyway, so I talked to a group of palliative care physicians, and I said, look, imagine that we called you, not in the last 2 weeks, but we called you the moment somebody was diagnosed with terminal illness. Okay, in the Western world, the time between diagnosis of terminal illness and end of life is slightly longer than 5 years. It's a long chapter. We said, imagine that we called you on that day and you helped that patient with quality of life for 5 years, for slightly more than 5 years. And you had all the time in the world and you helped them with sleep and symptoms and pain, and you help them reinvoke social relationship. You help them with everything that was not the illness, but quality of life. And then 5 years later, the person passed away. And then half an hour later, you wake them up. I know it's not possible, but for the story, imagine that you wake them up and you say to them that they are granted to live one of their chapter of lives again. You could do early childhood, you could do elementary school, middle school, high school, college, first year of marriage, a chapter. And I said, how many people would choose the last chapter of life? The last chapter of life, not the last 2 weeks, but the last 5 years chunk. And the palliative care physician said that under the right conditions, the vast majority of people would choose the last chapter.
That doesn't make sense.
I'll tell you in a second why it makes sense. But that gave me a sense they said that right now, almost nobody would choose it. But under the right circumstances, they think most people would choose it. That's the important difference. Now, you could say, why would people choose the last chapter? So you're a little young. How old are you?
I'm 33.
33, okay. So, most people, most of the time, live an unexamined life. That means that we do tomorrow more or less what we did today and what we did yesterday, and we don't change. We can go into details of why. From time to time, people have a crisis, like a midlife crisis, at 40 and 50, and then they look around and say, "Oh, how did I get here? Do I like where I got to? How did I get here?" And then sometimes they make changes. But if we're honest, most of the people who get to a midlife crisis realize that they want to make changes, but they don't. Most people kind of go through torturing themselves about how much they don't like their life, their job, their relationship, but they don't do anything about it. When people get diagnosed with terminal illness, this is it. This is the last chance for a midlife crisis. It's not really a midlife crisis. And done the right way, people make really brave decisions and live that last chapter of life in a good way. Now, you're probably saying that it's sad, because why don't people do it early? But the problem with early is you say, "Oh, I really want to change all of these things, but what if I live for another 30 years? Like imagine you say to yourself, I really don't like my job and I really want to see the Northern Lights. I want to move to Norway for a year. I have a job, I have a career, I have kids, I can't do it. Terminal illness diagnosis is okay, all bets are off. I can do it. So anyway, that study and the discussion with the palliative care physicians gave me the sense that the end of life is a place where I can contribute a lot. Because the way we do end of life now is all our fault as human beings, as systems. About 7% more or less in the US of people die quickly. Everybody else has a lot of time. There's an opportunity to do it much better. And I think it's within our grasp. Like what this palliative care physician told me is that it's possible. So I said it's kind of strange to be excited about, because it's a sad topic, but it's a sad and a good topic at the same time, because it's sad, it's end of life, but there's a lot of room for improvement, which is quite easy to achieve. Anyway, I have a lot more to say about this, but that's a topic that occupies most of my time these days.
Sorry, I got emotional. No, a question came to my mind, which is, if I was gonna die tomorrow, I was gonna die 18 months, what would I do? And would I marry this lady? Would I go for this job? Would I publish this book? And I felt a little bit of, it is very freeing. Now initially I said, "Oh, it doesn't make sense." Now after you explain it, I was like, oh. Yeah. It reminded me of a story that I read a few years ago, which is, there was a guy who was diagnosed with cancer. He was a blue collar worker, and the doctor told him that you have a few months to live, and his dream was to be a DJ. So he left his job and went and learned DJing on his own, and now he's doing like big parties, and the people who go to his DJing events, they say the music is very intense, and literally he's playing every night, like it's actually his last.
Wow. So one of the studies I did, do you know this profession called End-of-Life Doulas?
No.
So everybody knows birth doulas. Birth doulas help women give birth.
Yeah.
There's also end-of-life doulas. They used to be called death doulas, but that's not a good name. So it's end-of-life doulas. And these are mostly women who are not the medical professionals, but they're there to help. So they help the person understand what they want and have last discussions with their families. And they help them be comfortable and basically kind of usher the process, maybe the last week or so. So I talked to about 100 of those. We interviewed them to try and understand a few questions, but one of them was, what is a good end of life? And they said 5 things on average. They said a good end of life is no pain, which is medically quite possible, no loss of dignity in the body, also not perfectly possible, but you can make progress toward it, surrounded by love, having a sense of legacy, that you're leaving something behind. And the last thing that they said was that you have trust that when you are not going to be able to fully control your decision, that somebody that you can trust is going to do things for you. Now, if you think about all of those things, they're mostly possible. They're mostly possible. No pain is possible. No loss of dignity in the body, tough, but we can make some progress. Surrounded by love, possible. Having a sense of legacy, possible. Having trust in somebody that would help usher you correctly is possible. And it also, if you think about those things, it's not really medical. The pain, I mean, it's a little bit medical, but it's not fully medical. You know, it really is about the sense of what is a good life. And one of the reasons I care a lot about is, you know, we end the meal with dessert. Like the end colors back the whole meal. I think the end of life colors our sense of what life we had. You know, I was in hospital for a very long time. I was in hospital for 3 years. I completely don't mind dying. I don't want to go back to hospital. Like the idea of ending life with no control in a hospital bed, I think just takes all the dignity from life. I think it colors the rest of life. I'll ask you the question in a different way. Imagine you're married for 30 years. And every day you wake up and you say, my goodness, I love my significant other. I'm so happy. And 30 years, every day you wake up and you say, it's great. And then on the last day, you get a note from your significant other, and they tell you that they never really loved you, that they always had an affair, they never really loved you, it was a marriage of convenience, and so on. How do you look back at your 30 years? Every day you thought you were happy. Can you now say, I had a happy marriage?
God, no.
Most people said, no, I didn't have a happy marriage. I was an illusion, all kinds of things like that. But the end really colors the rest of our lives. So it's not just about the last chapter. It's about what is the rest of it.
My dad had diabetes and blood pressure, and for years I tried to fix him. I tried to get him the best doctors, best medicine, best diet, and I never really thought about how to make his end of life easier. He doesn't like any of this. And even hospitals, you mentioned it, man, my dad really hates going to the hospital. Uh, Hospitals are meant to fix people and never really meant to ease their departure. I mean, pets are not allowed there, for example. You cannot have, sometimes your loved one, you only have to have one person. You just mentioned that loved one is important as well. And now slowly I'm more comfortable with the idea, yeah, if he wants desserts, I mean, he can have some, he can go at home, we can get a nurse at home. And I think now he's a little bit happier.
Where is he?
Now he's in Lebanon.
It's in Lebanon. Yeah. In the US, 80% of Americans say that they want to die at home, but eventually only about 20% end up dying at home. And the reason is that, people say they want to die at home, and then they faint, and the family calls an ambulance, and they get them to hospital, and they connect them to all kinds of machines, and then you can't take them home again. It's really something that we, as a society, we need to think about how we respect life at that level, and how do we not let the medical complex take over. Yeah. After the end-of-life doula training, I was so inspired by these doulas that I went and did the training myself. So I'm now an end-of-life doula, and I helped a few people. And I would say it's both tough and empowering.
How was that experience?
So I'm not a standard end-of-life doula. I mostly talk to people about big decisions. There's a lot of sadness. Because these are people I end up meeting and talking to and caring about and so on. But there's a sense of life being precious when you think about end of life, and I really have the sense that I'm helping somebody. There was one guy, for example, that he started chemotherapy, but they lived away from their kids and grandchildren. And eventually we decided that he's going to move his treatment. That, it wasn't easy to move hospitals, and there's a lot of administration and so on. But we talked about, what happened if you die in this town? Your kids come to see you once in a while. The US is a big country and so on. So he did that. And the treatment worked for about a year. And then it seemed it didn't work out. And then I asked him, well, how do you want, let's assume you have 6 weeks. How do you want to spend it? And then he said that he wanted to do two things. By the way, during that year when he moved to be closer with his kids, he also got estranged from his siblings, from his brothers. They kind of split over the like this. And we basically got them together without blame about who did what. We got them back together, and they did the musical project. They were all musicians, and they decided they were going to record the record. And when we talked about the last short period, he said he wanted to finish the album with his siblings, and he said that he met his wife picking maple syrup, and he wants to go again and pick maple syrup with his wife. So, we changed the place of treatment again, and he moved to Vermont, and he went and did got some maple syrup with his wife, and then the chemo was very tough. It was very tough, and it wasn't going to be easy. And we had a very, very tough discussion. I said, what if this is it? What if the chemotherapy is like this forever? Because it doesn't look like it will get better. Like, this chemotherapy at this level is keeping you alive at a certain level, but this is also the level of suffering. I said, of course, at some point it would get worse. We don't know when, but forget about getting worse. Assume it will just stay like this. Do you want to live like this? If this is it? And he said, no. He said no. So we understood that, it's time to just stop the treatment. And just stop the treatment. And he had enough time to finish the task he wanted, and he finished the album, and he picked maple syrup, and I talked to his widow after he passed away, and she described what a period this was for them. The focus changed. It became about what is important in life, and it wasn't very long, but it was very, very meaningful.
And how did his brother or wife accept the decision to let him go? It's really hard.
Very hard. I think so. We talked about this. So I think that people that don't have pain don't understand pain. Pain. So I was burned in most of my body. 70% of my body was burned. I was in hospital for about 3 years. And burns are very, very painful. Very painful. And the treatment is very, very tough. If people are watching us, this is the reason I have this half a beard, is that this side of my face is all scars, but most of my body is like that. And people who don't have pain don't understand how quickly it becomes not worth it. So what I usually do to people is I say, imagine the worst headache you ever had. Just imagine that. That's probably the max you can imagine is the worst headache you ever had. What if I would tell you that this headache would be exactly like this forever? How would you take it? And most people would say no. Because you don't need that much pain if it's forever to say I this is not it. And I can tell you that at a high level, like the kind of pain I had, people become what we call pain people. And what this expression tries to capture is that people just focus on pain. At a certain level of pain captures all of your attention. It's all about how do I get this to be less, and there's nothing. There's no tomorrow. There's nothing. All of our cognition, everything is just focused on this horrific thing called pain, and you just want that to be reduced and hopefully go away. And it's also exhausting. It's exhausting fighting pain. So when you try to explain to people, say, look, for you, it's going to be very sad that this person goes. I certainly understand that. But try to imagine that level of pain. But trust me, you can't imagine it. So you have to multiply it. Would you want to live like this? And everybody says, I understand. No. So now let's think about how to help them. So she understood. We had the pain talk quite early, and she understood the pain. It was also good that we had it early, because people who go through chemotherapy and have a lot of pain need the people around them to understand the pain of chemotherapy as they go through it as well. Very, very tough period.
My father is going to the hospital. My knee-jerk reaction is to keep him alive for the longest period possible.
Yeah, I think that's a mistake. I think it's a mistake. I think the question is focus on quality of life, and ask the question of and quality of life and acceptance and closure and acceptance. So ask yourself, what would help him feel that he lived a meaningful life, that he was loved and is loved? How can you help him in terms of his legacy? So there's something we call an ethical will. And an ethical will has nothing to do with possessions. It has to do with the ideas you want to leave behind. So what are your father's main beliefs about life? What are the things he would like to live for you? And you can ask him, like, what's the wisdom you want to leave behind? What is your favorite poem, book? What is a story? What are the a story that you want to tell me about your childhood, meaningful moments, and so on.
And I'm too emotional to have those kind of conversations.
I understand it, but you also understand that it's not. You need to get over that.
You made a good argument of why let him pass his legacy on, let him have dignity, make sure that he's surrounded with people with love, will be more impactful to his quality of life than all the medicine and the hospital on diets combined, and he will be genuinely happier.
It's not 100 versus 0, but I think that dying is a human issue, and it's not a medical issue. End of life is about our humanity. Yes, we have an illness and so on, and we die because of a medical reason at the end of the day. But the way to approach it, I think, is not to just approach it for the medical angle. The way to approach it is to approach it from the perspective of what is a human being, what is a fulfilled human being, what is a human being that feels comfortable, that feels achieved, that is feel loved, that feel they have a legacy, that can trust. All of those things are incredibly important.
I'm looking down on my library right now, and I have over 3 books talk about death. The denial of death is one of them. Do you really believe that, with the idea that most of our motivations and desires come from the fear of death?
No, I don't think most of them come from it. I think that we have this really interesting relationship with legacy. I even ask people who are, perfect atheists and don't believe there's anything after life. I said, how would you feel if you knew that everything you created would be erased the day you died? And people say, no. Like, even people who don't believe there's an afterlife say, no, I certainly, I don't know why, but I want something to stay after. I think it is a real motivation. I think the motivation of legacy and so on. I'm not sure it's the fear of dying, but I think it is a motivation for legacy. I don't think it's the biggest, but I think it's certainly there. I know we didn't plan on talk about end of life, and we end up with the end of life. But I'll tell you one other thing. So my mother passed away 8 months ago. I got to be her end of life doula. I got to help her in that process. Extra complex to help somebody you love and care about. And what's interesting, many things are interesting, but one of them was that it was only after she passed away that I kind of realized how much I'm part of her legacy. So I used to think, oh, I'm me because I'm me. And only when she passed away, I saw all kinds of things that are me, but it's because of her. And I'll tell you one story. So so I think that I embody some of the continuation of her. So when I was 3 years old, my mother started working. She took a few years off work when I was born. I was the first child. She went back to work, and she was a social worker. She was a parole officer for juvenile delinquents. This was like her first few weeks at work, and she has there's a woman that she thinks that a young woman, she's 16. She thinks that this young woman did some crime. I don't know, I don't remember what. And my mother thinks that this woman should get some kind of suspended punishment and some therapy and help. And they go in front of the judge because she committed a crime, and the judge wants to send her to an institution. My mother believes she can rehabilitate, the judge doesn't. And my mother says, what if I can give her a job? What if I would give her a job? And the judge says, if you'll personally give her a job, she can be on parole. So my mother gives her a job, and this woman was my first nanny. So, and by the way, years later, so I was 3. Years later, when I was about 30, she came to visit my mother, and I came to see her as well. And she told me what a precious gift this was. She said she was 16, from kind of a troubled family in a troubled neighborhood, and all of a sudden, she would show up every morning and be handed the little kids to play with, and she said it was just amazing. She ended up calling her first child Dan after me, because it was such an experience. But I'm telling you this. Oh, I'll tell you one other story about my mother. We always had at our home kids that escaped whatever institutions they were in. So my mother was the parole officer. They were here, they were there, and they would escape, and they would come, and they would come to us. And she always gave them a place to sleep for the night, and then the next morning she tried to figure out what to do. So I grew up with lots of people who would escape from wherever, and I always knew these stories, but only when she passed away, I recognized how much this idea of caring about people and not finding, like, my mother didn't have boundaries of her profession. Like, there wasn't home-work balance. There was like, oh, this is work. No. It was all mixed. And the people that she was committed to, she was there in every aspect. And when I looked then at my personality trait, that I always thought it was my personality trait, I realized, no, it was really her. Like, my personality trait is really my mother's. It just felt to me for a long time it was mine, but thinking about it, I realized that part of me is continuing her. That gave me lots of comfort, by the way.
So you're saying that you and some of the work that you already have done is part of the legacy that your mom left.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And did you make sure to tell her that?
She always knew how much I loved her and how much I cared about her. But some of these realizations happened to me after she passed away. So I think she knew, but I didn't get to tell her enough. When in her last day, so I'm bringing the Middle East back into this. So my mother passed away. So the way it happened is that my mother asked me to come to Israel to meet her. So I booked a flight. The flight was landing at like 2 a.m. And she says, come at 8 to have coffee with me. I said, look, I'm landing at 2, 8, can I come late? I said, no, come at 8. Okay. So I fly through Europe, and this is the night that Iran attacks Israel. Israel attacks Iran. No flights. So I'm stuck. So it's early in the morning. I'm not in Israel. I'm in Amsterdam, and my mother calls me to have this call that she wanted to have face to face. And that's when she tells me she can't continue, and she wants to end her life. That she doesn't want to. And I try to help as much as I can, and I try to get people to activate, and I try to make my way to Israel to be with her. So this is and then it takes me about a week. Eventually I get to Cyprus, and I go on a little boat, and eventually I make it, and I get to her to be with her for the last night of her life, and we talk like the whole week. She talks practicalities to me. She gives me instructions about taking care of my sisters, and kind of her, like, what she wants me to do moving forward. And she tells me kind of the same thing with small variations every day with this, just to be sure that I got it and I have her wishes. And then I sit next to her, and we have this same discussion again, just to make sure we're all correct. And then I want to tell her how much I love her and how much she means to me. But I know that I will not be able to say anything close to that without crying. Like, I don't even know if I can finish the sentence. And I have the sense that she doesn't want to be sad. That she doesn't want me to cry because she doesn't want to cry. That we know what's coming, but there was this, it felt to me that there was a desire that she couldn't be sad at that moment, that there was like a time for sadness, but this was too late for the sadness. It felt to me that she didn't want it. So I didn't tell her. Throughout the week, I would tell her, but this real opportunity I had to sit next to her and hold her hand and tell her, first of all, I knew it would be very tough for me to even utter the words, but I felt it was just not what she wanted, so I didn't. I'll tell you one other kind of curious thing. So throughout this week, every day we have a discussion about whether she wants to be buried or cremated. Reasons for burial, reasons for cremation. She doesn't know what she prefers, and we talk about it every day. And then when I finally get to be next to her, she brings it up again. And I say, what do you want? And for the first time, she tells me why she's conflicted. And she tells me that she didn't know, because I was burned, she didn't know how I would take it if she would be cremated. Like, she made the connection between cremation and burns, and this was supposed to be her choice, but she was thinking about how it would affect me. And I told her that I did not see the links, and that what she wanted, but she was too exhausted. So she said she doesn't want to make a decision, and she wanted me to make the decision. So the next day she passed away, and I made a decision for cremation. And I kept on thinking about her question of whether it's connected, her cremation to my burns. And eventually I decided that it was connected, but in a good way. I thought that our family had my burns was the beginning of one kind of family trauma, and her dying in cremation was ending, and I felt that it was something that was actually connecting us, not kind of two bookends, two sad bookends connecting rather than being difficult for me. I felt it was a sort of a connection.
Do you mind just 1 second? Just need to get tissues. 1 second. Again, apologize. Maybe I'm getting too emotional certain parts. Again, now my self-development's kicking in. In Islam, we have a practice which is the more that we contemplate and think about death, for us it's a part of a prayer. And I had 2 near life death experiences, and I grew so much from this experience. I always give a funny story. I almost got ran by a car, internal bleeding. I have my entire lifetime pass through my eyes. It was very freaking boring. And I spent a few days in the ICU. After I went out of the ICU, my friends, my family, they start notice that even my personality changed. I'm an introvert by nature, but then I start to force myself to be an extrovert. I changed things were risky at the time. Do we need to have a near death life experience to have that, or no? Can we engineer that in some way or another?
So I think we are designed not to want to change. Our evolutionary speaking, evolution wanted us to spend as little energy as possible. It used to be in our evolutionary history that energy was expensive. Food, our brain takes a lot of energy, about 20-25% of our consumption. So nature wants us to conserve energy. Now, by the way, we don't want to do it, certainly not in the modern day when we have plenty of calories and we can spend more time thinking, but but our nature is to do the same thing day in and day out. And I think this idea of examining where we are and seeing whether we want to change is very, very tough. So I'll give you kind of a simple example about the stock market. So from time to time, it's useful to say the following. Imagine that somebody went into my portfolio today and sold everything. Didn't take anything, just sold everything. And I opened my account tomorrow and it's all in cash. Would I buy exactly what I had yesterday? Most people say no. It's particularly interesting with people with crypto. So I once talked to this guy who said he had 80% of his wealth in crypto. 80% of his wealth in crypto. This was when crypto was at the top. I don't know what it's now, but it was at close to the top. And I said, what if I went into your account tonight and I sold everything and you woke up tomorrow all in cash? How much crypto would you buy? He said 20%. So but change is very tough. Change is very tough. That's one thing. Another interesting thing is that we are programmed not to like risk. So again, think evolutionary. Let's say we are, hunter-gatherers, and let's say we go hunting. And let's say we go hunting and things go well, and we hunt a rabbit. How good is a rabbit? It's a little good. We have food for a day or two. Let's say something doesn't work out well, and a tiger hunts us. How bad is that? really, really bad. So in our evolutionary history, the upside was limited, the downside was huge, right? There's no dying has no similarity on the upside. The upside is, even if you hunt a deer, it's a week of food. Like the downside is, so nature taught us to pay much more attention to the downside. So nature said the downside is where the action is. Don't worry so much about the upside. Yes, try for it, but really, really, really pay attention to the downside. And we still do that. So when we look at modern life, we're still overly concerned with the mistakes, so the downsides, than we are with the positive things. So because of that, we live a little bit of a boring life. We don't make lots of changes. We're not very courageous. I did a study, by the way. I asked people, how much risk are you taking in all kinds of areas of life? Finance, career, continuous education, raising kids, hobbies. How much risk? 0 to 10. And then I said, what level of risk would you take to live the best life you can live? And in every area, people said, I need more risk. I need to take more risk to have a better career and more money and so on. In which area of life do you think the gap was the biggest between the risk we take now and the risk we think we should take if we wanted to truly have a fulfilling life? Which area of life do you think had the largest gap? Any guesses?
Which area of life has
Of
the
life.
biggest
The
gap?
biggest gap. Which area are we the most risk averse? Is it career? Is it money? Is it raising kids?
I would say career, unfortunately.
So actually romantic life.
Oh God, don't say that, man.
No, it's true because
So you're
you know
saying,
in romantic life, look, telling somebody that you love them and you depend on them takes a lot of risk. You become vulnerable. Telling somebody that you love them basically puts you in an inferior position. And people don't do it a lot. When they don't do it enough, that's what people report, right? They're saying that in romantic life is the area that people feel that they're the most underperforming in terms of taking the risk that they should be taking to live a good life.
I assume that people will not take risks regarding money and career, and this is where they feel regretful about it. But no, you're saying romantic
They do.
partners.
It's in all area. But let me give you an example.
Sure.
So a couple of years ago, I meet a friend in New York, and he tells me we catch up on life, and he tells me that him and his wife are not doing so well. They've been together for a long time. It's okay. And he asked me if I have some advice. And I said, of course I have advice. I said, do you have enough material to write a 3-page love letter to her? I know you have good things to say and bad things to say, but you have enough good stuff to say, only good stuff, to fill 3 pages with handwritten notes on only the good stuff. He said, yes, I have enough material. And I said, if you wrote that letter and read it to her or gave it to her, would it improve your relationship? He said, 98% sure it will. And I said, and now the important question. Can you bring yourself to actually do it? He said, no. And because we're both interested in decision making, he said, I know that the probability of failure is low, but he said, I worry that she will be cynical or mock me or react in some negative way. And I don't think I can take it. So there was a gamble that the payoff was very positive and large in his mind, but he was not willing to take it. And I think that's what's happening. So, when you take a risk at work, ask for a promotion, say something in a meeting, and so on, there's a downside, but it's not as painful as a downside from a person you love. The opportunity for a rejection from a boss is painful. A rejection from a romantic partner is much, much tougher to do. So yeah, so it's an area of life we don't take enough risk. But just to be clear, we need to take more risk in all areas, not just in that one. But that one, it was interesting. That one was the highest.
It is. One of my many fears is I would hate to be a leaf flailing into the background, and I want to have an examined life. And I remember, I mean, you have a very interesting career. Still remember the first TED talk that I ever heard you, read your books, and now you've been guiding people through their end of life. Any advice how can be more self-aware? Any tools that I can use to have a better to live an examined life?
So first of all, I think that it's really tough to do frequently, because it's painful. But I think once a while we need to do it. I have one day a year that I take stock of life. Like in Islam, is there a particular good day that would work for Islam to take stock of your life?
Yeah, yes, there's a few, but me personally, I do it on my birthday. So, because in Islam we don't celebrate birthdays, it's not like a celebration. So what I do is for the past 7, 8 years now, every year I take some time and write my will. And again, I don't put a lot of money. I don't have a lot of money to give, but basically, what I would tell my brothers, I think means now I'm reflecting back. I think my legacy would be as well, and even what I what I'm thanking my parents for. And every year, mostly like 2 3 things always comes up, which is what I'm thanking my family for. And I found even though I do it only once every year, their impact has been insane. Because sometimes some of the ideas that I had me I so I do it on a piece of paper. And I think one of the tools that I use to have an exam in life is writing, just examining my thoughts on a piece of paper.
Yep.
And this is I mean, I should do it more in prayer. So again, we pray like 5 times a day. Sometimes prayer, just do it like a routine. I don't really think about it, contemplate about it. But I think once a year I do it, and it's very, very hard. And again, you see me through this episode, I tend to tear up easily. Usually those sometimes like crying for like 2 hours. And
Wow.
I've spoken once to my friends. I told them about it. It's like, dude, it's your birthday. Why do you want to cry? I was like, dude, you have no idea. It's very beautiful, very, very freeing. But what about you?
So first of all, I think that's a very good start. The second thing I would add to this is I would think about something new and big that you should try every year. So, when if I ask you kind of what makes you happy or satisfies you, or the reality is that there's lots of things you haven't tried, and maybe you have a sense that something would work out for you, but you haven't really tried. So pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and trying new things is a really good idea. Yeah. So I sometimes go and do an internship in in companies.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
That's so
Um,
cool.
yeah, I like. we all end up in our career kind of randomly. Now, I'm not going to change my career, but I do want to learn other things and other skills and be challenged in a different way. So that would be number two. My third recommendation would be to think about a bigger project. So, for me, for example, I probably like you, I get lots of startups that call me, and people want some help or some advice on something with behavioral change. And it's very satisfying because in an hour, I can usually give them a useful insight. They show me the web page, and I can say, oh, you're not using whatever mental accounting correctly, or you're not using social proof correctly, and so on. And there's something incredibly satisfying in these small help, like 1 hour of my time. I can help somebody usually by quite a lot. It feels great. They're thankful, and sometimes they write back and tell me what they learned. But it feels good in the short term. But at the end, I think for satisfaction, we need some projects that are our own, larger and deeper. So, so today, for example, I had coffee with a guy. He's now approached by people who are elderly, they live alone, they are broke, and they're looking for a reverse mortgage. You know what? Reverse mortgage? They basically sell the house, they get a monthly stipend, and they can stay there until they leave. But what he does is he comes to their home, he moves them away for a month to another home, and then he fixes their home. He fixes the bathroom, the floors, the ceilings, he paints it, then he moves them in. Then he also helps them find somebody to help them take care of them and the house. So he kind of so and he showed me all kinds of videos of people who feel that he saved them because they were living in a house that was not worth living. They couldn't fix their house. They were not living in the right condition. They had no money, and they're very, very grateful. But he kind of jumps from a thing to thing, and he feels that he's almost working out of compulsion to do it, and he's helping and he's doing a lot of good, but he says it doesn't feel like he's developing anything. And I think there's a lot of very easy way to feel that we're being helpful, but without being satisfied. So it's like empty calories a little bit. So I think that with him, we talked about what are some of the bigger lessons, the bigger structure. Can he get more involved in these people's lives and stay connected, help them throughout. Not just do this. Okay, we'll take you out. We'll fix the house. We'll do this. And I think a lot of us we need something that is ours. That is a big project that we get to think about. For me, books do that because they are big projects that take a long time. I organize my thought and so on. So we said, do this list. I think we need to find something that is ours. And then, this is just pure speculation. I think we all need some artistic outlet. I completely no evidence for this, but it feels to me that, the cavemen did paintings and they did tools that were more beautiful than needed and so on. And I think we have a need for some creative outlet. It could be cooking, it could be pottery, it could be something. But I think we need something like this. So those will be my three things for you. I think this. Sorry, we said four. This yearly examination, learning something new, do an internship, do some learn something new to basically make sure that you're on the right track of your life, that there's not something else that you could enjoy much more. Find a big project and find an artistic outlet. I think that for me is the mix.
Is anything that you want to promote? Where do you want to send our audience a little more? Is it your books, or do you have anything that you want to promote recently?
No, I have a website, danariely.com. I also have a website that I complain about bureaucracy called the Center for Advanced Bureaucracy. I really dislike bureaucracy, but my website is the place if you want to catch up on things. And I don't know how we ended up discussing all of these things, but thank you for the time.